Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Aquaman. So I got to see that week early screening through Amazon Prime last night, and boy was this a lot of fun. This movie gives me a lot of hope for more DC, EU, whatever you want to call their cinematic universe, and I loved it. I had so much fun. Is this a flawed film? Yes, there's problems in it. This isn't a perfect film. This isn't like top tier superhero films. But this was a fun ass time and I enjoyed it from start to finish for the most part. And at 2 hours and 20 minutes, you needed that. This is directed by James Wan, and there's a lot of people in the kitchen in terms of who set up the story and stuff like that and the writing of the script. And you could tell. But in terms of what James Wan, which he's telling the story of Arthur Curry, the Aquaman, and him trying to find his rightful place as king of Atlantis and trying to stop his half-brother Orm, who is trying to destroy the surface world. And James Wan, I want to see him do more films like this. Like, I love his horror. I love The Conjuring. I wish he was coming back for The Conjuring 3 and actually directing it, because I'm a huge fan of him as a director. I love his work. I think he's very talented. But watching this film, I haven't seen something as amazingly awe-inspiring in terms of scope, especially from like a battle or just such liveliness since like Lord of the Rings. And this film gives off a Lord of the Rings vibe. Underwater. That this film really captures that immense scope of everything, and this feels epic. And there's sequences where it's like, in terms of pacing, this has a lot of fun energy about it. It feels like an old school adventure film. Like if you're going back to Indiana Jones, which goes back to early serials and stuff like that, this has that vibe, and I really appreciate that about the film. And in terms of other pacing, there's some sequences where it's like this film gets bogged down by let's explain things a lot, and exposition is a big weakness of this film because there's so much of it just dumping, and there's scenes where it's like, okay, let's get back to things. And then there's some other points where it feels a little bit rushed in terms of some of the story, because there's so much story going on in this film that there's sequences where it's like, oh, we met this race for a hot second and just move along. And those sequences, in terms of world building, it's just like, let's just plop them in there. You'll remember them for next time. And they don't get a whole lot of fleshing out. And those are the parts of the film in terms of like pacing that don't really work for me. In terms of storytelling, this is such a fun, vibrant film, and it does allow itself to breathe when it needs to get dramatic. And there's one thing, there are some sequences where it's like, I was waiting for a one-liner to cap off a serious scene, and it didn't. And it really worked. And it's kind of like, some other superhero films lose some of that emotion and pathos because they're just like, gotta get that one-liner in. And I appreciate that this film, at certain important points, didn't do that. And that worked for me. And in terms of how this hits home, it's funny. There's a lot of good humor in it. There's some bad humor. There's some dumb lines. But mostly the actors really sell what they're trying to say, but some of it's goofy. And then there are some truly emotional moments that do hit close to home. And there's intense moments, and I have to say James Wan really knows how to really sell things. When you do slow motion at certain points, and it works amazingly well, and there's so many hero shots in this movie, and it's just like, I am Black Manta, and it goes in like slow motion and has this wonderful frame shot of Black Manta, or it's like, you could call me Ocean Master, and like there's points where it's like right up Patrick Wilson's face, and it's like, okay, I got this. And the opening sequence where you meet Aquaman, like Jason Momoa's Aquaman. There's so many like hero moments of like with his like raging guitar and him just like smirking at the camera with his intense stare and just like, I could appreciate this. This film was so campy, so much fun, so ridiculous. In terms of the writing, obviously there's some strong characters that have arcs, but there's a lot of characters in this movie. And a lot of them don't have a whole lot to do. Like Volko, who played by Willem Dafoe, is literally Basil exposition. Just blah! Let me tell you everything you need to know. And then there's sequences where it's like, there are some strong characters where it's like you understand like Arthur Curry and he is a great character and he's a lot of fun. You have other characters that are a little more fleshed out too, like Mara. Our villains, you feel why Orm wants to do what he wants to do, and Black Manta is a great villain set up so well from the beginning and has heavy emotional moments for him that really makes you feel invested in him as a villain. And that really works. And then there's other characters that are also just thrown in there, like you have Dolph Lundgren, who he reads his lines. And then there's a bunch of other characters that are like kings of other like kingdoms, and they're just kind of thrown in there, and there you go. And that's it. And in terms of the story, they try to squeeze too much into this film. It feels bloated, but the main arc throughout the film, I think it's a fun adventure, and you really feel like you're going to all these different places. What I love about this film is there is a lot of CGI that does look really good, and some of the green screens look really bad. But there's a lot of practical sets, and I appreciate that because James Wan does that in horror too. With The Conjuring, there's a lot of practicality in it, and I love that in this film. And how this movie was shot, which I believe cinematographer is Don Burgess, who did the Conjuring films, at least did the second one with James Wan, and how they shoot, and I mentioned before, the framing of like these characters and having really intense moments, but also how they shoot all the action. They went to the school of George Miller, how to shoot action, where it's like you need a focal point. And as long as you keep a focal point, the action can be great, and it's not muddled, and it's not overly edited. There's some long shots in this film, long takes, and how this camera follows along with everything in certain sequences are amazing. There's a foot chase through Sicily. There's, in this giant CGI battle at the end, there's a through point of camera work that works so well, and it really makes you feel immersed in the action. And then like hand-to-hand combat looks so well because they actually take it back and allow you to see things, camera tilts and Dutch angles, and all of it works so well, and I loved it. And then you have the soundtrack, which is done by Rupert Gregson Williams, and the soundtrack of this was amazing. It felt epic. It mixed like and like original, like traditional kind of film score that you'd expect, and like heavy raging guitar. That's one thing I love about the DC films is they have great soundtracks, and that's something that I really appreciate about films, and is one of my disappointments for the most part about a lot of Marvel films. Up until very recently, they've been turning things around though. But in terms of everything, this is a well-rounded, really good film. And if you want to compare superhero films this year, there's, could think of 5 big ones, like Into the Spider-Verse, this, and then the 3 Marvel films. This doesn't crack my top 3. I still think Black Panther and Infinity War and Into the Spider-Verse are up there, but I thought this was a lot better than in Ant-Man and the Wasp. This was so much fun. If they keep making Aquaman films like this, I'm all about it. Fun campiness, but really hits emotionally. Hopefully the next time around there isn't so much They're not trying to do too much. There's not so much exposition. And some of the casting they can't help at this point unless they recast people, but hopefully give some more depth to some of the other characters too. This film really worked for me, and I thought this was a fun time. I highly recommend it, and I think this puts a little hope moving forward with DC's films. And I'm looking forward to Aquaman 2. Are you? Comment. Let me know what you think. And once you see the film, do you think I'm full of crap and this was a piece of shit? Or do you like, oh my god, I loved it too, I really enjoyed it? I don't know, let me know. And let's talk movies. And thank you as always for supporting your Wasteland reviewer.